The rise of African nationalism did not happen overnight. It was not a single thunderclap, but a slow, deep rumble that grew louder across the first half of the 20th century. To understand its causes, one must listen to the voices of those who lived through it. The mission-educated clerk who could not sit on a park bench reserved for whites, the railway worker who returned from the Second World War with a new sense of dignity, and the farmer whose best land was taken for a European's plantation. These experiences, shared by millions across the continent, forged a common identity that transcended old tribal loyalties and gave birth to the demand: Africa for the Africans. Please share, like the video, and subscribe to our channel. The colonial grievance, the fuel for the fire. At its core, African nationalism was a response to the raw injustice of colonial rule. The European powers had carved up Africa not for the benefit of its people, but for the extraction of its wealth. Africans found themselves dispossessed of their best lands, forced to pay heavy taxes in currencies they had to earn through back-breaking labor, and subjected to humiliating racial discrimination. In Kenya, the Kikuyu watched as the White Highlands were fenced off for British settlers, while they were pushed into crowded reserves. In South Africa, the 1913 Natives Land Act made it a crime for Africans to buy or rent land outside designated areas, turning millions into squatters on their own ancestral soil. In the Belgian Congo, the chicotte, a whip of raw hippo hide, was used to enforce rubber quotas, and hands were amputated as punishment for failing to meet them. These material and physical abuses created a deep reservoir of anger, a fuel that would eventually ignite the flames of organized political resistance. The mission school, the unexpected forge. The second great cause of African nationalism was, ironically, a product of the colonial presence itself, the mission school. While colonial governments were reluctant to educate Africans beyond what was needed for menial labor, Christian missionaries, whatever their other faults, did open classrooms. In these rooms, young Africans read not only the Bible, but also the works of John Stuart Mill, Thomas Paine, and the poetry of William Wordsworth. They learned about the French Revolution's cry of liberty, equality, fraternity, and the American Declaration of Independence's assertion that all men are created equal. When these educated Africans looked at the color bar, the contradiction was unbearable. They had been told they were British subjects, but they were denied the rights of British citizens. They had been taught to love freedom, but they lived under tyranny. This generation, men like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, and Leopold Sedar Senghor of Senegal, used the tools of the colonizer's own language and political philosophy to dismantle his rule. They formed the first welfare associations, newspapers, and protest delegations, speaking the colonizer's tongue, but demanding liberation. The Great War and its aftermath. The cracks in the empire. The First World War, 1914 to 1918, shook the foundations of European prestige. Hundreds of thousands of Africans were conscripted as soldiers or porters, forced to carry supplies and fight in campaigns that were not their own. They saw white men killing each other in industrial slaughter, and they witnessed the French, British, and Germans all begging for African lives to save their empires. The myth of European invincibility was shattered. When the war ended, many veterans returned home with a new question. If we are good enough to die for the empire, why are we not good enough to govern ourselves? The peace treaties that followed, particularly the creation of the League of Nations and its mandate system, promised self-determination for all peoples. Although this promise was applied only to Europe's defeated enemies, African intellectuals heard it loudly. The 1920s saw the formation of the first Pan-African Congresses, organized by W.E.B. Du Bois and others, bringing together activists from Africa and the diaspora to demand independence. The Second World War, the unfinished revolution. The Second World War, 1939 to 1945, was the true catalyst. Over 1 million Africans served in the Allied armies, as combatants in Burma, as drivers in the Middle East, as mechanics in North Africa. They fought against Nazi racism and fascism, and they learned modern military discipline, organization, and leadership. They also saw Asia. They watched as the Japanese defeated British, French, and Dutch colonial armies in Malaya, Singapore, and Indonesia. If Asians could defeat white men, why could Africans not do the same? More importantly, the war crippled the European colonial powers. Britain and France emerged bankrupt and exhausted, unable to maintain vast overseas empires. The United States, the new superpower, was openly anti-colonial, at least in rhetoric, and pressured its European allies to grant independence. The Atlantic Charter of 1941, signed by Churchill and Roosevelt, had declared the right of all peoples to choose their own government. When Churchill tried to exempt the British Empire, the contradiction was glaring. African nationalists seized on this rhetoric, demanding that the principles for which the war had been fought should apply to them as well. The rise of Pan-Africanism and international solidarity. Parallel to these developments was the growth of Pan-Africanism, the idea that all people of African descent on the continent and in the diaspora shared a common struggle and a common destiny. Pioneered by figures like Edward Wilmot Blyden, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Marcus Garvey, Pan-Africanism gave African nationalists a broader vision. The 1945 Manchester Pan-African Congress was a turning point. Attended by young men who would become Africa's founding fathers, Nkrumah, Kenyatta, Hastings Banda, and Obafemi Awolowo, the Congress called for immediate independence and warned that Africans would use force if necessary. The independence of India and Pakistan in 1947, led by Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, provided a powerful model. If the jewel in the crown of the British Empire could break free, then the colonies of Africa could do the same. Gandhi's tactics of non-violent civil disobedience, boycotts, strikes, and mass protests were adopted by African nationalists across the continent. The trigger, the post-war betrayal. In many colonies, the final spark was a specific act of colonial arrogance in the years after 1945. In the Gold Coast, Ghana, a protest by ex-servicemen against poor conditions in February 1948 was fired upon by British police, killing 3 and sparking riots that swept the country. The British arrested the moderate leadership, but in doing so, they forced a young, fiery Kwame Nkrumah to the forefront. By 1957, Ghana was independent. In Kenya, the return of white settlers after the war, demanding more land and political power, pushed the Kikuyu to launch the Mau Mau Uprising, 1952-1960. Although brutally suppressed, it convinced the British that the cost of holding Kenya was too high. In Algeria, the French refusal to grant meaningful reform led to a bloody 8-year war of independence, 1954-1962. In the Belgian Congo, a sudden wave of nationalist riots in Leopoldville, Kinshasa, in January 1959, forced Brussels to grant independence within just 18 months. The roots of a continent's awakening. To explain the causes of African nationalism, then, is to tell a story of layered grievances and accumulated hope. The economic exploitation, racial humiliation, and forced labor of colonialism provided the raw anger. The mission schools gave the tools of political articulation. The 2 world wars, especially the second, broke the prestige of the white man and trained a generation of leaders. The example of India and the promise of Pan-Africanism provided a vision, and the specific betrayals of the post-war era lit the fuse. By the mid-1950s, what had begun as scattered protests by isolated chiefs and angry workers had become a continent-wide movement. From the cashew plantations of Guinea to the copper mines of Zambia, from the cocoa farms of Ghana to the docks of Dar es Salaam, Africans sang a new song. It was not a tribal song, nor a regional one. It was the anthem of nationalism, the cry of a people who had decided, at last, to take back their own history. The colonial flags would not fly forever. The winds of change were blowing, and they would sweep the old order away. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support is our building stone.